Thank you for watching. Today I'm going to give you my thoughts on the opioid epidemic as it's being reported in the media. When I first hear about the opioid epidemic as it's being currently reported, there just seems to be a lot of hypocrisy. I remember when I was growing up in the 80s, one of the things that hit the minority community was crack cocaine, which is basically just cocaine that's cooked up. In the early 80s, we saw the introduction of crack and the overall proliferation of cocaine. Whereas cocaine was kind of more seen as like a middle class, upper income drug, crack was definitely targeted toward lower income / minorities because it was just cheaper. And essentially you just take some cocaine, you cut it, you cook it up, you got crack rock. So I remember at the time, there was all these media reports about crack monsters, crack zombies. It was always a picture of an African American person, usually emaciated face. There were a lot of stories about crack babies being born addicted to crack. I remember even the movie Halle Berry was in, I think it was called Losing Isaiah. It was about a crack mom who had the baby and, she had to give the baby up because she couldn't take care of it. But I remember specifically the messaging, the portrayal was that crack was impacting black people, not because of an opioid epidemic, but it was just portrayed more as like a moral failure. Like, you guys just have to get off crack. Like, stop making bad choices, get off crack. So now when I hear about the opioid epidemic, it's essentially the same thing, but the only difference is this is affecting non-brown people and it's affecting people in traditionally conservative red areas like Kentucky, West Virginia, Ohio, Michigan, Missouri. And it just seems very hypocritical that 30 years ago, when crack was ravaging people of color, and that's, leaving aside the incarceration of, hundreds of thousands of young black men for selling crack to try to feed their family. That's, even discounting that part. So now it seems hypocritical that now, because these drugs are impacting communities that are not primarily lower income people of color, it's an epidemic. We got to do something. It's not seen as a moral failure. It's seen as like a disease, like, ADHD or something, or bulimia or something. It's not seen as, oh, well, these people need to just stop taking heroin, stop taking meth, just, stop doing it. And it really makes me angry because I was given this message, when I was around 10 to 12, that this was a problem, this was a people problem. So I remember that was the beginning of like Nancy Reagan's Just Say No to Drugs campaign. And that commercial where they say, this is drugs, this is your brain on drugs. That whole thing was targeted toward what I remember it being as like crack users, crack abusers. So it just seems hypocritical that now we want to spend government money and it's an emergency, it's a public health crisis because it's affecting different people. Now, regardless of what your politics is, just look at the data and you tell me, do you think there's some hypocrisy there or not? You let me know. So this is the kind of stuff that really infuriates people like me and other minorities and African Americans of color, people who were alive and growing up during that Just Say No era, that whereas our generation or the people who were doing it then, it was seen as just like a moral failure and it just, they're just naturally predisposed to drugs and crime. Now that it's a different race or a different socioeconomic background, there's a lot more sympathy involved. So that's what it seems like to me. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.